Some time ago, I was wandering around the religious Hellenist sphere on the interwebs, and I stumbled upon this video by someone named Jacques from 3 years ago about Athena, and I heard this.
Athena, according to Pindar, invented the flute.
At this point, I didn't know much about the music of ancient Greece, so I got curious. But as I started looking into this myth, something weird happened. You see, the Greek word in the original text is aulos. Now, that bothered me, because I faintly remembered having heard about an instrument called the aulos, but it was a reed instrument, meaning that the sound is produced through a small strip. That's the titular reed, named so because of the material used to make it. Other examples of reed instruments would be the saxophone or the oboe, for instance.
So what? It seems to me that flute is a generic term. Can't we use that for a reed instrument?
Well, remember that musician friend of yours? Yeah, the kinda know-it-all type person. Well, remember how they told you that the saxophone, despite looking like a trumpet or a tuba, does not actually belong to the family of brass instruments, but rather to the woodwinds? That's because on brass instruments, the mouthpiece is a conical piece of metal, whereas on the saxophone, the mouthpiece incorporates a simple reed, like the clarinet, which belongs to the woodwinds. What this example shows is that the criteria for classifying wind instruments is the kind of mouthpiece that they use. And that's where our problem arises. You see, flutes, whether they be recorders, transverse flutes, even panpipes, they are what is called edge-blown instruments because of how their mouthpiece works, which clearly differentiates them from reed instruments.
Alright, but with all that being said, what about the aulos?
Well, in the 19th century, the experts when it comes to the music of ancient Greece do believe that the aulos is a flute. In 1875, Belgian composer and music theorist François-Auguste Gevaert publishes a book called Histoire et théorie de la musique de l'Antiquité, which we could roughly translate as a history of ancient music and its theoretical framework. In this book, which would become a work of reference on the topic, Gevaert simply translates the word aulos as flute.
Okay, hold on a second. Don't you have stuff in English for the people in the audience?
Yeah, sure. For instance, Scottish scholar David B. Monroe, in his 1894 book The Modes of Ancient Greek Music, simply used the word flute to refer to the aulos. This interpretation of the aulos as a flute was widely used even throughout the 20th century. And even today, such prestigious institutions as the Metropolitan Museum of Art still recount the story of Athena inventing the flute. So it makes perfect sense for Jacques to use it.
Alright, back it up then. I don't even know why we're doing this video if it's a flute.
And yet...
Fuck you.
And yet, even at the end of the 19th century, there were people calling bullshit on that. And if you read today's scientific literature, there is a very large consensus to say that the aulos is, in fact, a reed instrument. Actually, the people writing on the topic seem to particularly delight in reminding people that anyone translating aulos as flute is incorrect.
Isn't that what you're doing right now?
Guilty as charged. At least it isn't as embarrassing for me as when Jacques does it.
Chaillley, isn't he a super famous musicologist? Why bring him up?
Well, he wrote in 1979 that translating aulos as flute is an inadmissible misinterpretation that has become traditional amongst non-musician Hellenists, as in the historians. It is elementary that one takes precious care to guard themselves against it.
Okay, he would have called Jacques a moron, but besides that, I don't see the problem.
Well, in 1982, that is 3 years after he said that, the new edition of the Larousse Dictionary of Music came out.
Yeah?
That dictionary contained several articles penned by Jacques Chaillley, including one on the aulos.
Oh no.
In which he says that the word aulos can designate a flute.
Yikes.
Yeah, he probably just forgot to update his contribution to an earlier edition, but hell. Although basically no one in the academic world today would translate the word Aulos as flute, there was a lot of confusion during the 20th century due to that idea that it could be used to describe all kinds of wind instruments from ancient Greece, such as a kind of transverse flute called the plagiaulos. Of course, the name doesn't help. Or the syrinx, which we would now call the panpipe. To make matters worse, syrinx was also the name of an accessory that Aulos players sometimes used.
I'm getting a headache. The point is, the Aulos is a reed instrument, right?
Yeah, in fact it is a double reed instrument, meaning that its mouthpiece is similar to that of the oboe or the bassoon, rather than a simple reed like the clarinet or the saxophone.
So, Alfina didn't discover the flute, but the oboe.
Yes! Except that this guy is Stefan Hagen. He's a specialist of the Aulos, and as you can see, he worked a lot on recreating this instrument today. According to him, calling the Aulos an oboe is incorrect because of the bore of the instrument, which influences a lot of how it sounds and actually resembles more that of a clarinet. The closest match in terms of instruments still used today would be the duduk, but really, the best would be to simply use the word Aulos, which, yeah, okay, but that kind of defeats the point of using the name of an instrument that people are more familiar with. So, whatever. Call it however you want, as long as you're aware that someone somewhere on the internet several years later will be nitpicky about it.